Hello, today we'll talk about Chapter 4, Mobile Networking and Web Services. So in this chapter, we will talk about some simple usage of web services for your mobile applications. We'll try to create a mobile application project as usual. So this is a usual mobile application project. So here you can see this is a normal mobile application project. But because we are trying to teach you a little bit about using web services today, so we will actually have to create another project for web service as well. So we create a dynamic web project. We call this a servlets 1. We can define a new runtime here. We have Tomcat 7 installed. We can try to browse for the Tomcat 7's location. So it is usually under C:program files, and because I've installed it, it's under Apache Software Foundation Tomcat 7. So if you use a different version, please try to look accordingly where you install it and also what version you have been using. Most of these things are okay, so you can directly just create it accordingly. You will get a project, servlets 1 project here, and you can run the servlets 1 project. When you run the servlets 1 project, you run as run on server. And you can select these particular details. If they are not correct, you can try to select them, but usually the default options are usually correct. Then they will try to run this project. When you're running this project, they might actually tell you certain situations like problems you might have. For example, your port number is being used. You can notice a servers being created over here. So Tomcat by default uses a few ports, and if you're running more instances of Tomcat in the background already, they might have already occupied the ports, or you could actually run multiple instances of Tomcat as well. You can always go to these servers. Whenever you run the services for the first time, they will create this folder for you and show you all of the current running or created services. You can go to the server.xml and try to update the port numbers that are crashing. For example, here, the shutdown port 8005 is being used. You can change to 8006. The 8080 port is being used. You probably can change it to 8085. And 8009 is used. You can try to use 8010. These are usually a tree that comes with that it has problem with. So once you have actually updated that, you can actually run again. You can allow the access. If the Windows security gives you some issues, and you can see that they will open up a browser within your Eclipse showing you a HTTP localhost 8085 servlets 1 here in the URL, and they tell you HTTP status 404, service resource not found. Why? Because I have not created any resources to be found right now. If it does find anything, it will be extremely weird. So we had not created anything to be found here. And you can see this is actually opening up the browser to show you certain things that's being hosted here. You should be reminded that this is not part of a mobile application. The web services is a very different type of project. That's why we are using Eclipse here, so that we can show you that we can create both mobile applications and also web services using the same tools. If you're using some other tools that is specifically only for developing mobile application, you might not have the tools to create the web services in the same tool. You may actually need to download some other tools to create web services for you. But you have a lot of choices in terms of web services. You can use different type of web services, and here in this course we'll show you example of using Java servlets, since we are already using Java based technologies right now. You do have other similar situations that you can actually create web services with. For example, Microsoft ASP.NET, you have PHP, and you have JSP, and these are the different popular options that you can consider while developing some web services. So here, under the Servlets 1 project, you can go to Java resources and source to create your web services here. You can create new servlets. I can call my servlet login get, because I'm creating a simple example of login here for you to see, and I can try to select whether I want to use a constructor or not. I don't really need a constructor, and I can inherit the doGet method from the abstract doGet method. So they will actually help me create roughly how a servlet looks like. Some of these were not important. For example, the serial version UID, I can choose to have it or not have it, so that's up to you. The important method that we are dealing with over here is the doGet method. It tells us what to do and how to get things done in this doGet method. If you run these right now, you still get request resource is not found for this thing right now. So this, however, if you look at the URL right now, you can see that you get a login get over here. Previously, you don't see this, because this is a very specific resources under servlets 1 that we are running right now, and we can try to write something in over here so that we can have something to actually happen. So we can try to actually print out certain messages here. And how do we do that? First, we have to actually have an output. One of the simplest is text output, where we can use a writer. This output is obtained from the response of my get method. The request and response of my method is actually the request that the user sent in and the response that the servlet will give back to the user. So response is the output of the servlet that is to be sent back to the users. I can try to send a string response back using the writer that I have, the print writer I've opened up here. So I can actually right now send certain requests back. So I can try to run this again. and I can always restart the server when I want to show some of these newer services. So they will actually open up another service for me, and here you get to see testing being displayed here when I run login get. For any older runs, if you try to refresh them right now, you can also see my new updated results. I can also get the input that is coming in via the request. So I can check for input by getting the parameters. The parameters, I have to know the parameter names. And for example, here, if we try to have a name and password being sent over to us, we can get the parameter via the name. We can then print out this name and password that we obtain. You can see that the updates will happen without actually running the applications again. The update will still actually take place automatically. So once you started to write the servlet, you can continue to refresh your servlet and you can see the update being reflected. So here, how to key in the input. Using a get method, the input can be actually added into the request URL directly after a question mark. And you can key in the keys of the parameter followed by their value. And you can use ampersand to separate other different values. So I can key in a name John and a password ABC123, and I will be able to see John and ABC123 being keyed into the service. As you can see, this is merely getting an input from the user, processing it, and showing back an output. The whole concept is not that different compared to a method that you write in programming. But the differences is this method is not locally within your same application. It is not just being a different part out from your application, it is also stored at a very different location. They are supposed to be placed in a server, and you have to actually request via a network and ask them to do something and sending back the result back to you. Of course, there are a lot of advantages of having that done, provided that a server can store more data, a server can process data faster, and hence that is why we will sometimes tend to have some of these actions being done in a server instead of processing them locally. Here we try to do a very simple example. So I try to fix my names. This is not a usual practice, but because we are just doing some example to show you how things work, I can try to hard code a comparison of a name and a set of password here. In actual situation, you will have to connect to a database and try to use queries to check whether your name is existing in the database with the corresponding password or not. But because we are trying to do a very simple application here, will not show you the aspect of connecting to a database. You may try that by yourself and to connect these services, the servlet, to a database that is being placed in the server, and to read query data and also use the data for results or other further processing. So let's look at the current situation. Assume that if the name and the password matches, we will print an OK, and if it doesn't, we will print not OK. So provide and the name and the password will also be printed. So right now the name and the password matches, it will show us an OK. But if the name and password doesn't matches, it will show us not OK and showing out the name and the password. So next, we will try to actually look at our application right now, and we will try and see how our application will actually work with this servlet. So looking back at our application right now, what we need right now is a simple application. I might not want to use relative layout. If you want to change this, you want to start from scratch again, it's quite simple. You just have to delete whatever you have and start from scratch again. They will automatically create you the codes whenever you try to drag in some layouts and start all over again. So it's a very simple method actually, and it's very straightforward and very easy to control. So we are trying to do a very simple application here that is going to showcase a certain situation where we are going to showcase you how to use a certain text view and edit text. But here we are also going to show you some other ways of actually creating the UI. Instead of the regular ways where we usually create the UI in the XML, it's also possible to create the UI directly dynamically as you are writing the codes. So you can create some dynamic UI from there. For example, when I have a text view and I want to create a text view from scratch, it is possible to directly just construct a text view from scratch using the constructor instead of using find view by ID. These text view can directly be used. And I will also use one for password. I can have edit text being created. And we can have an edit text for name and password. But I'm creating a second edit text here because I would want to do a simple trick that I will show you later on. For the second edit text, I can try to set the input type for this edit text because this is going to take in a password. The input type that I'm setting over here can control what kind of data is allowed to be the input over here. For example, some of them control that they would be some text, some of them will control that they will be purely some numbers only, and the second one will help us control the variation of type of the text that is going to be shown here. And here we are going to use a variation for password. This variation allows the data to be hidden directly after typing. So this is a use typically for password to hide password, and you can try to select this to hide your password. We can then create linear layouts in the same manner as well. So as you can see over here, I can create the whole interface completely via code. So it's up to you whether what kind of methods you want to use to create your interface. I'm showing you here that it's possible to completely create this using codes if you are not doing it in the XML. The differences of having them done over here is you will have the flexibility to actually try to create things dynamically during runtime. For example, within for loops, within eval statements, switch cases, and etc., rather than a pre-planned situation. But of course, it will not be as simple as a drag and drop. You can see that I may need to spend some time to manually link up all these elements by adding the wheel, so it's not a simple drag and drop. Then I can display the whole linear layout directly as the object. I can then set on click listener to react to the click and try to do something here. The on-click listener comes from android.view.view, and you have to input the on-click method. So what we are going to do here is to connect to the web service. In order to connect to the web service, you have to run it in a separate thread. This is to avoid problems with the networking services running too long and actually suspending your UI. So they basically force you to create a different thread. Here we can show you a way to create the thread as a separate class. So I'm creating a thread right now as a specific subclass of the thread class, and it will actually try to function specifically to handle threads that situations that is suitable for me to deal with my thread. So I have a public my thread here, and this constructor over here will take in certain parameters that I'm going to pass in here. One of the important things that I need to add in while dealing with these threads is a handler. The handler that I'm going to create over here is very important. I'm going to receive the handler here as well. The handler is going to be used to communicate the two threads, the background thread that I have been working with and the main thread, so that whatever I have been doing in my background thread could be passed back to the main thread for processing. And this is what the handler is used for. So I will need to actually receive these things from the user so that I can actually communicate with the server and try to react in the UI. And then I can define what to do in the public void run. So I can try to catch the exception and print some error messages so that in case anything went wrong. So what do I do here is to use the URL object to connect to my URL, and then can use the HTTP URL connection object to actually try to open a connection from the URL that I've defined above to get the content length. I can then try to open up the stream from the URL to get the response of this URL request. And since what I'm going to get here was string-based data, we'll try to actually put them back into a string. By using the read method, we will read this into a byte array. So that we can easily convert the byte array back into a string, and we can trim it in case there were some blank spaces that were added unintentionally. We can check the value. If it's okay, then that's what we need. We'll do whatever we need, and if this is not okay, then we'll do something else. If this is okay, we'll try to go to a different activity to prove that things are fine. I will try to do a simple test here, so I just create a simple activity to showcase that if everything is fine, we will be able to get to a different activity. So we call this next activity, and we will go there when everything is fine. Okay. Otherwise, what we'll need to do is we'll have to throw some error messages and etc. In order to ask our main UI to do something, we can't directly just type the codes. They must be done via handlers. So we can use the handler to post a request back and request our main UI to actually get the job done. So we are using a handler. And the parameter that we are posting back is a runnable object. So the runnable object behaves like a thread as well, where you can actually define the run method and you can tell them what to do. So I'm telling them what to do. I'm going to tell them, post an error message to tell people that something is wrong. And of course, show the message as well. And at the meantime, we also do another thing, which is we can actually go to et password and we set the text to blank. So sometimes you get to see some applications, they will actually help you reset the password if you got it wrong. So this way, when the button is being clicked earlier on just now, I will actually call my thread. I will create an instance of the thread. I will pass them the things that they need, which is the name, password, and handler. So where's my name? My name comes from et name. Where's my password? The password comes from et password. And I also pass them the handler. So et name. Oh, I should actually change this modifier to final. Right? And let's start the thread. Now the last piece of the puzzle is the URL that we should include early on. The URL is supposed to be the URL that shows us the request. We can copy from our browser early on. The whole request is being done as such. Okay. But we cannot send in a URL directly like that because our name and password is determined by the user. That's why it's being passed to us via the constructor. So the name and password must actually be inserted according to actual name and password received from the user. The next thing that we have to worry about is here. Localhost is actually when you test web services, they will show you in localhost because you're hosting it in this computer and you want to actually show how's the outcome. So you can directly use localhost to refer to the same computer. But right now you're testing in this phone, this emulator, and this is not actually sharing the same IP with your actual device here because it's a virtual device that's running on top of your actual device right now. So if it wants to try to access whatever that's being hosted by your computer, it must know the IP address of your computer. You can try to get the IP address of your computer. Sorry. Right. Okay. So I'm actually inserting the IP address so that the virtual device can actually try to access my device. It can actually access my desktop over here to actually get to the web services that is being hosted there. So now we can try to type in the ID, and then we can type in the password. So if the password is incorrect, we are supposed to see an error message telling us that the password is incorrect. Okay, and before that, we should actually do one more thing, which is to actually try to go to the manifest, and then you need to actually try to set the permission. So it looks like this in the XML. Users permission, Android name first, Android dot permission dot internet. You can also see that the permission is being added here. Okay, you can also add it via here as well. Then we can try to run the application again. So permission is important and it has to be added. Permission will be added into the situations that is requiring certain security measures because it's dangerous. For example, accessing the internet, accessing the call log, trying to use the camera, and etc. So here you can see it gives you a wrong ID or password, and then it tries to reset your password. So I can try to type again a correct password. Then it will actually bring me to a different page, which is showing me a successful login situation. So of course, a web service can do a lot more than that. It will be able to be used to actually give us a lot more functionalities that you can try to play around with, and you can actually create a lot more possible potential using web services. Hopefully you're enjoying the class, and this is basically most of the basics that we want to actually try to teach you for the class. Thank you. Okay, and before that, we should actually do one more thing, which is to actually try to go to the manifest, and then you need to actually try to set the permission. So it looks like this in the XML. Users permission, Android name first, Android dot permission dot internet. You can also see that the permission is being added here. Okay, you can also add it via here as well. Then we can try to run the application again. So permission is important and it has to be added. Permission will be added into the situations that is requiring certain security measures because it's dangerous. For example, accessing the internet, accessing the call log, trying to use the camera, and etc. So here you can see it gives you a wrong ID or password, and then it tries to reset your password. So I can try to type again a correct password. Then it will actually bring me to a different page, which is showing me a successful login situation. So of course a web service can do a lot more than that. It will be able to be used to actually give us a lot more functionalities that you can try to play around with, and you can actually create a lot more possible potential using web services. Hopefully you're enjoying the class, and this is basically most of the basics that we want to actually try to teach you for the class. Thank you.